Hello and welcome to Fortune of the Fool. I am your host, BREN BIGELOW. I use they, them pronouns. My sun is in Pisces, my moon's in Aries, my rising's also in Aries, and my Mercury is in Aquarius. And we are here today with our special guest, Sean Marshall, right?
Yep.
Marshall, that's
Yes.
okay, perfect. And do you want to tell everyone what your sun, moon, rising, and Mercury is?
You bet. My sun and moon are conjunct in the 9th house in Leo. My rising sign is Scorpio. I have Mars in the 1st house there as well. And then my Mercury is in the 10th house under the sign of Virgo.
Amazing. And this is under what system?
This is the true sidereal system, which accounts for how the energy is present in the natural sky.
Great, yeah. And I was sharing my information with Tropical, so yes, awesome. So today we're going to be talking about shadow work, which is really exciting. You have a lot of amazing wisdom that I'm really excited to dive into within that realm, especially when it comes to the law of creation, which we'll get into shortly. But before we do that, we wanted to open this circle and this energy by drawing a tarot card for each of us to just see how we're showing up and how we can bring those energies consciously or bring any subconscious energy into the consciousness. That's a tool that tarot can help us do.
Excellent.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to pick your card first?
I will.
So we have this cool deck. You want to tell the class about what this deck is?
Yeah, so this deck is my meditation deck. I use this to connect with the archetypes. This is only the major arcana, so 0 through 21. And yeah, it's from the Builders of the Antietam, and it's basically the Paul Foster Case deck, which is different than what most people might know as the Rider deck. So that's the deck we're using.
Cool. I'm excited. They're so laminated and fancy. So do you want to just pick intuitively?
Yeah, I'm going in, and
Ooh.
that's
the card. What did we get? What's Moment of Truth?
The High Priestess.
I love that card.
This is going to be the moon card for us,
Yeah.
which is perfect because this represents the unconscious mind.
Mm-hmm. So literally what we're talking about today within that shadow.
Yep.
And trusting, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, within the shadows of, taking our own intuition and really embodying like what our intuition is rather than like what everyone else might be saying or, honoring. This card's so interesting too because the pillars are black and white.
Yep.
Which, and then intuition's in the middle, which is like there is black, there is white, and there's also that middle ground within that intuitive energy.
This is a great card for what we're talking about today.
I'm really excited. Well, you're also talking about femininity as well within that, and we can dive more into that too.
Absolutely.
But
All
okay,
right.
I want to draw my card. Let's see.
All right, and
Yeah, shuffle it up. Get your okay. Let's see. These are so cool. I've never drawn from a laminated huge deck like this one. Ooh, this one's calling to me. What we got here? Ah! I got the tower! I got the tower, which is so great. Oh my gosh.
This is perfect.
It is perfect. And the imagery on this card in particular, this art is very I'm feeling intensity. There's a lot of intensity with this one because, all different decks have different artwork and things like that. So what my intuition speaking to within this is like, sometimes the whole structure has to come down to start a stable foundation, and to peel apart. Sometimes you don't even know it's part of the old foundation until you start wiggling with the brick or something, and then the whole thing collapses on you and like, wow, I've been in a safety hazard this whole time with that one brick, What did you have to say with that?
So again, another perfect card for talking about the shadow, because when we have a shadow and are triggered, usually the result of that is anger. And if it's an extreme enough trigger and an extreme enough energy, it's literally energy coming from source, knocking our conscious mind and our unconscious mind flat to the earth for us to figure out what the heck just happened, did it happen again, and what's my next step.
Yeah. Oh. Well, and I feel like I've definitely been going through a lot of tower moments recently with a lot of change, and really excited for the new tower that is to be built, yet also needing to make sure that I close the doors on a lot of other things so it doesn't come haunt me in my next chapter.
Yeah, so we have a masculine card here with Mars and a feminine card here with the moon. Working with shadow, those energies are perfect for today. They absolutely are.
Well, and I just want to talk about the colors too really quick. Me having the red root chakra energy, you having the blue throat chakra energy is a really interesting balance of like how can we connect our roots, our animalistic nature even, or like our very human nature with that more like I'm seeing this also as like the higher divine energy, but how do we then communicate those energies and have a balance of the spirit and then the material realm?
Yeah.
Great.
This is gonna be fun.
I'm really excited. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm so excited to see how this evolves, and we'll just use these cards as a reference point if whatever we're talking about might bring up any of those archetypes that we can further talk about with our own experience.
Yep.
So from there, I would just like to ask you now. We're talking about shadow work. So what does shadow work mean to you? How would you define it?
So shadow work is really the willingness to go deep into one's own unconscious mind and pull out the uncomfortable ugliness that's there and embrace it for the healing that it can give us. It really is not work for the faint of heart, because it requires us embracing that part of our ego which we so vehemently deny, because the shadow is everything that we are not.
Yeah.
And so just a little caveat here about the shadow. Everything that is not us is our shadow. And so this glass of water is my shadow. Do I have a charge on it? Does it bring up gunk in here, baggage as I like to call it? No. And so I can easily dismiss it. So everything that is not us is our shadow. It's how our ego identifies who we are.
Yeah.
It says, how do I know who I am? I have to first know who I am not. And so that concept of as above, so below comes right in here with ego and shadow.
Absolutely. So Sean and I both met through the Denver Astrology Meetup group here in Denver that I host with my friend Rosalie. And so we have a really big astrological emphasis within the understanding of that. So if you are an astrologer, maybe wanting to look into this, a great thing that you actually taught me was it's the balance between the first house and the seventh house, right? The first house being yourself, and then that seventh house of being your shadow or the other, like you're talking about. And, that might not be a shadow, like the glass of water might not cast a shadow that's apparently triggering to you, but maybe for someone else it could be. Maybe someone didn't have clean drinking water, for a big amount of time, or has a certain relationship where it could be triggering, So your shadow work really depends on your unique life experience, your unique chart, and it could be different from other people. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and just to play on that first house, seventh house theme, the shadow shows up in our seventh house. It shows up in other places too in the chart. It can show up in any house, really.
Yeah.
However, the seventh is when we step out of our unconscious mind and we begin stepping forward into working with others. And so it literally is the other that is not me. And so where we see shadow come up is it comes up in intimate relationships. It can also come up in business marriages. So anybody that's not me is showing up in a business setting. It's anybody that you have an agreement with. Like right now, we're in each other's shadow because we agreed to do this podcast.
Right.
And so even though that's a simple shadow, it's just like, okay, well, how is it? Well, we're both projecting on each other, or can be projecting on each other, the willingness to want to put forth the best episode possible that we can. And so unconsciously, there's an expectation.
Yes.
And expectations are not necessarily our agreements.
Oh, can you speak a little bit more to that?
Well, absolutely. So an expectation is a projection that we often put on other people. We expect them to show up in a certain way. Like there may have been a projection from each of us to show up professionally today.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if that didn't happen, that expectation, if I get grumpy that my expectation wasn't met, well, then I have to take a moment. I have to look at it and say, well, wasn't it an agreement? Okay.
Was this actually verbally discussed?
Yeah.
You mean? Or was this something that I assumed?
And so imagine that you're in a partnership, and how many times can you imagine being in that space where you had an expectation of your partner and it wasn't verbalized or formalized as an agreement, and things blew up and went sideways? We get grumpy and we have a tower moment. We vomit anger towards our partner in a way. And a lot of times it's because it was an expectation that was never verbalized.
Right.
So the seventh house is also just talking about, and seventh house is justice. It's Libra, it's the scales. And so whenever we feel this tension that's not in harmony or in balance, that can bring out something within us that projects outward in a way that is tying into that unconscious baggage. And so there's so much there. It's also the other side of the political aisle. And so that's the really low-hanging fruit, that is the seventh house. And so we get to deal with that. We see it every day. It's so prevalent today. And so, my promise is to not talk about whose side is right or wrong. My promise is to ask questions that bring up the annoyance or the agitation within you that says that's not me, and for you to hopefully look inward and say, okay, how is that me?
Yeah.
And it's rarely a one-to-one. There's usually some metaphorical representation of how that energy shows up.
Yeah. So you work a lot with clients with shadow work, right? And we're talking about, it can be a very vulnerable process, but the benefits are very rewarding. So what is the biggest benefit that you want to just share with people? Why shadow work is so important and worthwhile doing?
Yeah. So at the unconscious level, perfect that we have the High Priestess here. At the unconscious level, what we have at the unconscious level are dichotomies. We see the world through the concept of duality or dichotomies. It's perfect. We see the black and the white here with the High Priestess. That represents binary thinking. This must be so. It represents, you could say, even an attachment at the unconscious level to something that we believe to be absolutely true, or something that we attach our identity to as true. Like, God forbid, if it wasn't true, that must mean that I'm wrong, I'm bad, I'm guilty. And now we're starting to tap into the shadow, or the potential shadow energies.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of different tools you can use for shadow work. You wanted to talk a little bit about the law of creation today. And I just want to know, what is the law of creation?
Yeah. So I touched on it. It's actually, it's here in this card, and it's actually throughout the tarot deck. We've got the two colored pillars. In layer cards in the tarot deck, these pillars are gray, like in the Hierophant, and then also in the characters that are in the Judgment card. They're ashen gray, which symbolizes balancing or harmonizing of the energies. And so, this concept of duality. Imagine for a moment. Let's take an idea. Let's say, okay, for there to be good, there must be
bad.
Okay, for there to be hot, there must be
cold.
Got it. Now, what we've done here, and you can use this too for anything in nature, for there to be existence, there must be non-existence. So you can take this idea of duality and just know that at the moment a thought comes into mind, the reason and the capacity that that thought to be X, Y, or Z is because you have the equal and opposite of that. For there to be hot, there must be cold. For there to be good, there must be bad.
For light, there has to be a shadow.
For light, there has to be a shadow. Perfect. Thank you.
Mm.
That was awesome. And so imagine the shadow is something that you cast. If and hopefully this gets into frame, but imagine that the sun is behind me here, and it's casting light unto my conscious self or my unconscious self. What ends up being cast onto the ground is that part of me that is unseen. It's my shadow. This is where Carl Jung actually came up with the concept of the shadow. It's that part of us that we don't know or that we deny in ourselves. And so it's the higher self shining through our consciousness, and it's what we don't see is what is there for us to work on. Mm-hmm. And so that shadow is, again, it's everything that's not me. Mm-hmm. So, well, but going back to the law of creation, think of it for a moment in terms of this, or I should say, connect with it at something that's emotional. And because we're working with shadow in 7th house, we talked about it earlier. And I like to use this as an example because it's that low hanging fruit. But think of the opposite party politically that you don't align with. That is likely going to bring up something in you that you deny. Okay, that's not me. And so the way we use this law of creation is okay, well, it's your label. The energy is in your label at the unconscious level. And so there's a spectrum along that label that you see and you identify with. At the unconscious level, even though the energy of that thought goes way out here, we
have the
only
blinders on,
see through here.
You can only see. Mm-hmm. So you have limitations within that.
Yeah. So in the book Flow by Csikszentmihalyi, he says that every second that goes by, there are literally 2 million bits of information that are available to us at the unconscious level. And we were able to grab 126 of those consciously. And so the question that begs to be asked here is, if in any moment I can only grab 126 bits of 2 million, if I can only get those 126 bits, what am I missing?
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify, the law of creation you're saying is without, like, for one thing to exist, it has to have its opposite.
It's equal and opposite.
It's equal opposite,
yeah.
Right? So light, dark, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then with it, so how is that? So that's the law itself. It's just like for something to exist, it must have like an equal opposite.
Right.
That's the law.
Yep.
And then within that law, that's how we then understand the shadow. Because if we're talking about light, the shadow is the dark.
Yep.
But also with like hot, the shadow could be cold or.
So the equal and opposite would be cold. I can give a tangible example of a time when I was triggered into my shadow. Okay.
Yeah.
So there was a point when my stepson was going through his first year of college, and he was doing everything that every freshman student should. He was testing his limits. He was pushing boundaries. He was experimenting with substance. He was not doing great on grades, and he was just spiraling downward because things had gotten out of hand. And on top of that, he gets bed bugs.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I need help. And I'm like, well, help might look like a lot of other things, but it's not going to look like moving into our house with bed bugs. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I got pretty angry. I got upset, and I'm sitting there going, I'm having this dialogue with myself. I never verbalized this to Gabe, but I'm having this dialogue with myself, like, that little, he's not being responsible. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this didn't even come out as an action. However, I ruminated on this thought so heavily. I'm like, he's not being responsible. Damn it. And that was.
I like what you're doing. You're pointing the finger.
Yes.
Outward.
And so I was
Yeah.
pointing to the very thing I was giving my power away to.
Ooh.
So whenever, it's not just that we have three fingers pointing back. Yes, we do. Look at yourself for the answers, but I was pointing to the very thing that I was giving my power away to.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my dialogue, I get stuck on the word responsible. Okay.
So that's the trigger within this relation or
Yeah.
this theme.
Like I was internally, I was losing my shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and so I'm like, gosh, what is it? And I'm like,
So as you're digging, you get to the root of responsibility. That
Yep.
is the thing that's bringing up this emotion of anger.
Yep.
Okay.
And having been a hyper responsible kid, responsibility has always been an energy that I've brought forward. And so sure enough, I find it, I label it. It's my label. I have to own this.
Mm-hmm.
He's not being responsible. Okay. Now, what I had to do with it, and I felt it. You're gonna know it when you land on it. You're gonna feel it. So it's responsible. So okay, well, I could look at it as a 1-for-1. Well, how am I not being responsible?
Mm-hmm.
The shadow rarely works that way. It can. Okay, I can certainly look at other areas of life and say, well, I could be responsible here or here. Yet that didn't seem to guide me in the direction I needed to go for this.
Well, because his irresponsibility is now influencing your responsibility because you, as a parent, feel like you need to step up in a certain way to help, but the way that that looks is different. So you are still responsible within his irresponsibility, but it doesn't have to look like the responsibility that he's asking you to show up as. Correct?
It can go there.
Mm.
In my case, what I had to do, and this is an important question here, I had to ask, what is the positive possible benefit that he gets from not being responsible?
Mm.
Okay. Another way that we would ask that from a psychological level is what is the secondary gain that he gets from not being responsible?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he got to have a crap ton of fun. He got to do drugs. He got to do whatever, all good. But when I landed on, oh, he's having a lot of fun, boom, I'm like, and it was just the awareness of it was that quick. And I'm sitting here going, oh, I've been hyper responsible from this tall. I've been missing out on fun. How is it that I'm not stepping into and taking responsibility for my own fun?
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, I had a charge on that situation.
Mm-hmm.
That was one example of me using the shadow work.
Sure.
And as soon as I realized that, I was like, oh, there it is. I've been denying myself fun my entire life over this overexpressive need to feel responsible.
Yeah.
And that came out as me just ruminating on this. I'm sure I said some grumpy things to Gabe during that moment. But that was an example of my shadow coming out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, he's not being this. How could he? How dare he? Anytime you feel yourself projecting in a blaming or putting somebody else at cause for your feelings, that is an example of there being some shadow energy.
Right. So basically, you were triggered by his. You didn't give yourself the amount of fun that he gave himself.
No.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he does have to pay the consequences of that as well, too, for sure. And also, wake up call for you to maybe have more fun or
just to be intentional with my fun.
Unconscious about it. It's like, oh, this is a trigger that I'm bringing into the conscious now. I know that I have this trigger about having fun and responsibility, and so now that I'm conscious of that, the shadow's not leading me. Now my consciousness can guide me.
Yes, I'm no longer hooked. You know when you have a shadow issue because you're hooked by the emotion, and it keeps you spinning in that, ruminating in that energy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's precisely it. So as an antidote, my own work there was to take action towards scheduling fun in my life. Mm-hmm. And being the Virgo, it did have to be scheduled.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I get to be intentional. We were talking about this earlier. It's like,
Mhm.
I don't plan. That's one thing I don't plan is fun.
Right.
I usually just kind of wait for an opportunity or, yeah.
Yeah.
So that is an example of shadow. And it's a pretty, how do they say? That was an easier one. Even though it wasn't easy, it was an easier one conceptually to work with.
Because there are some shadows that are really hidden there.
Mhm.
This is something that I do in my client work too, is like, you're saying you want something, but what's the root of that? Is that your actual desire, or are you trying to get something else accomplished through that desire? So, for example, someone might want a lot of fame, right? They're like, I just really want to be famous. I want to be famous, whatever. It's like, do you actually want the fame, or do you want what that can provide for you, which is maybe like resources or attention, things like that. It's like, do you actually want fame, or because it's kind of like the monkey's paw, right? You can wish for something, but be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it, right? So if we are not conscious, if we're chasing the shadow rather than the consciousness of the shadow, we can actually get what we don't want, even though our dreams can come true. It's just not actually what we wanted, because we're not actually getting the root.
And that's usually because the secondary gain, what the unconscious mind is going after, is usually different than what the conscious mind wants. And often it'll have to do with some level of preservation of the ego or safety at the unconscious level.
Yeah.
Is it that the highest directive of the unconscious mind is safety? Your unconscious mind will do anything to keep you safe. And however, safety is through your lens, unconsciously. So what you might feel is safe is something I would feel something different. Like we all have that different 126 bits that we look and know safety through.
Definitely. Well, and that is such a primal thing, and I find that so interesting with like the energies here, because I'm feeling that safety is like that red root chakra, like Martian energy of survival and things like that, whereas this High Priestess energy is more I don't want to say evolved, because that's not the right word that I'm looking for it, but I do see it on a higher dimension of like, it is intuitive, and that is the animal and like that root, but also it's like this higher dimension of what's even beyond the physicality of things.
Yeah. So this is what happens when we are checked out from this. So the unconscious mind here, and then the conscious mind would be represented by the magician. That's the first time that we see that energy in the deck.
The magician is the conscious mind, you
Yeah.
said, and this is the subconscious mind.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, and with the water emotions, you look too at her eyes. Her eyes here in this picture, she's kind of droopy and drowsy, and so she's almost in a trance like. And it's as if the emotional body has some maturing to do still. So the magician and the High Priestess, they're the evolving stages of the conscious and the unconscious mind. When they get to be more mature, we run into the Empress and the Emperor.
Right.
Or you could say that the Empress is impregnated, and she's impregnated representing the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. So it's the union of the magician and the High Priestess becomes the creation energy of the Empress.
Right. So magician and High Priestess are almost like immaterial more than like the Emperor and the Empress. That's very physical. I don't know. I see magician and High Priestess as like concepts, as well as like more than like the physicality. Again, like the Emperor and the Empress would show up as, this is like the magician's like showing you, okay, these are the tools that you have, like it's up to you to use them, but the tools are here. I'm not really necessarily going to show you how to use them. You have to explore that and figure that out on yourself. And the High Priestess teaches you, like, you have the wisdom within you. It's just about, can you trust it? Can you follow that? Or are you going to be bogged down? Because it is a sleepy state, right? So when we're sleepy, we're not quite like, there's a lot of wisdom in that state, yet also we were talking with Pisces even earlier today, like what's the difference between the dream world and then the delusion, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what's like how I feel like I need to interact into a specific situation could be different than how you're going to give me advice on how to act on that, depending on your own life experience and value system.
Value system. I love that word came up because our values are where a lot of baggage and these dichotomies through the law of creation exist. And so a value is this is a little bit of a tangent here, but a value is where you spend your time, and it's how you choose to evaluate the time that you've spent. And people could say, well, I value integrity. That could very well be. And do you spend time being of integrity? Okay. So somebody say, I value work. Got it. That's pretty measurable. I spend 50 hours a week working, 60 hours a week working. Got it. So you could say that I value work. It's evident based on the results. A lot of times people will spend hours and hours and hours doom scrolling or doing things that aren't productive, but yet they value the safety of not having to risk putting themselves out there.
Which is why they do the behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Well, and this is bringing me to another thing that we've talked about, which is about the axes within a birth chart, for example. So an example that we were talking about a lot is like if your value is career, building your legacy, things like that, you're going to invest a lot of that time into that 10th house energy of your career. But one part of the chart can't be, acknowledged without that opposite, again, that law of creation energy, like the equal opposite, which is then that 4th house home, Cancer. So if you're investing a lot in your outward projections, things like that or career, that will drain or take away from the opposite because there's only so much energy and there could be an imbalance there of some sort.
Yes, absolutely. And so, one of the ways that this showed up in my personal life was growing up with a single mom. She had to be career mom. And so for me, my experience in the home life, even though my mom, I know she loved me, there was a level of mothering and nurturing that I feel I may have missed out on because of how much time she had to spend doing career.
Right.
And so those are axes for sure. 1st house, 7th house. We're talking 1st house, 7th house. Putting myself forward versus the needs of the other. And so in Libra would be the opposite. Libra will do anything to put the other person's needs first, or let me rephrase it. Libra can do just about anything to make the other person feel at the center.
Right.
So it's just, where does that show up? Not oddly enough, where this energy shows up for me when I look at charts the most is it shows up along the node path. And so if the south node is our karma, it's what we came into this life with, we're good at that house, we have natural skills. When we experience somebody that is maybe less gifted with that resource that we have, we may project a level of shadow.
Which is what happened with your stepson, you being like responsible versus that fun.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm very responsible. Why can't you do this?
Saturn, I had Aquarius in the 4th house. Saturn is the ruler. So it's just, it's like, okay, that shows up. That shows up. For me, it did. And then 2, the north node being our dharma or our path is, there could be a shadow there if there's a fear of stepping into it. Okay, I like to focus on the emotions that come out of my clients in terms of exploring potential shadow issues. And so if there's negative emotions of fear, anger, hurt, sadness, or guilt, those are the big ones. We'll focus on those.
Because our emotions tell us everything. They're so powerful. And I feel like that example that you're giving earlier about like spending your time doom scrolling or whatever, there is a comfort in that because I lost my train of thought, what I was going to say, but within the realm of what you're saying, like not wanting to face those emotions, like wanting to hide from those emotions because they are so uncomfortable.
Mhm.
That's also an avoidance of shadow work in a way, because it's like, oh, well, I'm upset about this. I don't want to deal with it, so I'm going to do something else to avoid it.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I like to talk about a lot is escapism, because I'm so good at it. And sometimes I don't even know I'm doing it, but like I'm such a feeler, so I'm so sensitive to any like little shift and with lots of stuff going on constantly, it can be, you know, really hard to always choose the healthy route to, you know, move through those emotions.
Mhm.
So yeah, escapism is like a tendency, or like drugs, alcohol, things like that have been like a path that I've used in the past to cope with these emotions, which are less appropriate now in my, you know, in retrospect. Now I'm seeing and I'm trying to make more conscious decisions, but it's so much easier to go straight to the phone to scroll like after a hard day of work or whatever, feeling guilt or any of these things, rather than like sit down and journal and really take the time to sit with that and feel it, you know.
Yes, and how easy is it? Oh, I've got my phone in my hand. How long has it been there? 10 minutes? 20 minutes? Yeah. So I can be guilty of that.
I mean, we all can.
Yeah.
We're all human.
So
Oh, and there's other things playing into that too, like the dopamine chase. You know, the benefit, like you were saying, there's always a reason for our behavior. The benefit of, you know, avoiding those things feels like better. Like the dopamine is more pleasant than the facing the
yes.
less. And if it's right at your disposal, you know, like having your phone in your hand or the bar right next to your work right after a work day, like the convenience of it also, you know, it's more convenient to do that than like make sure you schedule a therapist appointment after every time you feel an intense moment, you know.
Yeah. It's you know, the archetype energies that are available in the signs of the zodiac, they can lead us to connecting with the type of shadow response that we might have. So really, where your outer wheel is in the chart, where your zodiac signs are, they can lead you to the behaviors that are being demonstrated as you experience shadow in that house.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of crazy. If we go back to the law of creation, you know, we have these two energies. If for there to be night, there must be day. Well, neither one of them is right or wrong. However, if one, like, let's say during the springtime when the days are getting longer, that scale is having more light pressure put on it. In the winter, it's having more dark pressure put on it. And so what we look at is there an overuse of the strength that's available in the archetype, or is there an underuse of the strength? And if we were to take Aries, even though that's not the Emperor card, we'll take Mars just because it's there. So if we take Aries as an energy, what does Aries want to do? It wants to direct its will out into the world. It's about self-discovery. It's about asserting its will into the world. That's a balanced reflection of Aries. It's beautiful. We all can benefit from taking that in and pushing that out in a balanced way. So if we were to say, okay, well, let's look at Aries when we use too much of it. Well, Aries can then go to aggressiveness,
Right.
or some people would say, or anger, all right? Well, if it's not bringing enough energy, it might go to passive aggressive. Okay, and so it's important to know that Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, everything has a balanced energy or harmonized energy, and then things can go wonky for overexpression or underexpression. And it's usually within one of those energies that you can find your own personal resonance with how you lose your stuff in that house.
Yep. I feel like that speaks so powerfully to the nodes, the north and the south node within that, because the nodes are naturally very extreme, right? Like the head of the dragon, that north node is like wants to devour anything in its path, right? And then that the tail of the dragon, the south node, is like great release, like the smacking of the tail around to like get stuff. I'm feeling very visual with this. So the pull of the extremes, like, you know, what I notice sometimes within my own nodal experience when I'm trying to go for that north node, sometimes you can go into the shadow of that really easily. It's really easy to do that. And then when you go into the shadow of that, then it's really easy to fall back on that south node. Like, oh, well, I tried that, you know, path, but it didn't work out because I was looking at the shadow side rather than the, you know, light side, or that's what I was trying to embody. I'm going to fall back on my south node tendencies. So is that making sense? I'll give an example just to kind of clarify. So my north node is in Libra. That is my 7th house, which is so interesting. We're talking about shadow work. And then, but my rising sign's Aries. I have a lot of Aries energy, moon, rising, and Venus. So I have a lot of struggle with balancing, like not over, like doing the Libra, like over people pleasing or over accommodation or keeping the peace, even if I do need to use my voice to keep the peace in other ways, you know? So then that, in relationships, I'm trying to strive for that. If I get burned or hurt by that shadow or feeling, you know, any of those like grief feelings that you were talking about, then I lean back into that south node Aries, like, well, I guess I don't need anyone. I'm just going to do me. You know, it can be very extreme within that.
It can, you know, if I were to, you know, when I coach with clients and we're really in touch with that nodal energy, my task as a coach would be to step into your north node in ways that are south node.
Ooh, will you please elaborate?
So my north node is in Pisces. My south node is in Virgo.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, learning to step into that dream space, step into that realm of faith and trust and meditation and finding connection that resonates with me spiritually, that for me is that's my journey. And so I get to bring Virgo energy to it. And so what I do is, I mentioned that I meditate with these cards. I have a music stand and I do open eye meditation.
Oh, wow.
And I'll go through them in order, one each day.
Mm-hmm.
But I won't just do that. I might start with 5 minutes a day on one card, 5 minutes a day on the next card, 5 minutes a day. I'll go all the way through. Then I might go backwards through. And so I'm bringing a Virgo process to a way that allows me to get into that into the watery depths of Pisces. And so I can connect with these archetypes now that I've gone through that meditative growth with the archetypes. I can connect with them very easily. Yeah. And it's just a matter of going, okay, my shadow just blew up. Got it. Let me go into the star card next. Because if Tower happens, it's literally a path of getting back to balance, getting back to center, getting to the Saturn card. I'll go and meditate. What's the lesson of the star card? It's you know, there's that fish there for a reason. It's that fisher, kingfisher, goes into the collective. It pulls out that unconscious learning. That learning, once I can go, now I have something I can take constructive action with.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. As you're talking, I had a thought as well that I wanted to ask you, is that you're talking a lot about like the 7th house being the shadow in a lot of ways, which is so interesting to me because I've always thought of the 12th house as more shadow. And like you said, we can look at a lot of different parts of the chart and find shadow everywhere for sure. Yeah. Especially I see that with stelliums. Like if you have a big concentration of energy in one sign, for example, like you're going to have to find balance in the opposite energy somewhere, whether that's people external to you or embracing that energy more. But I just wanted to ask you about how you see the 12th house within shadow work, because personally, you know, the 12th house literally is our subconscious. So that's what's operating without our, consciousness. That's like, again, what's outside of that peripheral, where we're seeing, that's everything that's kind of what we can't see.
Yep.
So yeah, how do you see the 12th house in relation to shadow?
So the 12th house is hidden things and so much more. It's that part of us. You could certainly look there for shadow, because it's connected with Neptune. Neptune is that energy that wants to keep things fuzzy and hidden. And so I almost say I don't look for shadow. I haven't looked to it for shadow. So I'm not saying there wouldn't be gold there to find. The 7th house is a relationship house. And so Carl Jung once said that we will marry the person or get into relationship with the person that will show us what it is we need to learn most of in this life. So we marry our shadow, or we get into relationship with our shadow. Yeah. And if you think about it from a law of correspondence, we naturally attract to us that which we resonate with. So here's my, for lack of better words, here are my unconscious shortcomings. I'm projecting them onto you unconsciously for you to fill them. Now we're getting into the anima animus when we initially project onto our romantic partners. And this is a whole nother aspect of the unconscious that we can go into. However, this is why the 7th house is so important from a shadow perspective, is it is those agreements. A marriage is literally, it is an agreement. Legal agreements, like if you sign a contract to buy a house, you're going to be projecting through 7th house energies onto either your realtor, because you're in a contract with that realtor to buy a house. Now you're in a contract. So contracts are also shadow.
Ooh, very 7th house. Well, and it's interesting, the 7th house is also a signifier of open enemies, whereas the 12th house is the hidden enemies.
Yes.
So, they both definitely can call out to that. I suppose I'm a 12th houser. My sun, Mars, and Saturn all in the 12th house, and Placidus, if you count that, then also the moon. So 12th house is I've done a lot of work there, because a lot of things in my life, a lot of elements have been something that I've had to figure out through time. It's like, oh, I didn't have these energies so readily available for me growing up. So then, you can, if you do invest in these things and like use your consciousness to illuminate them, you can have a better understanding of them through time. Or, a lot of 12th housers can also experience, that escapism that I was telling you about. It's just about your choice of free will within the shadow. Like, are you going to live in that realm? Are you going to continue to feed into that subconsciously, like through that escapism, maybe drugs or whatever? Or are you going to bring it to light so then you can address it more consciously? You had something you wanted to maybe say with that?
I'm not so sure it's a conscious choice when we're talking about the 12th house. It is the unconscious, and so by focusing our energy there, we can begin to ask ourselves, we can step into some Cartesian logic here and ask ourselves, what would happen if I did? What would happen if I didn't? What wouldn't happen if I did, and what wouldn't happen if I didn't? So we can go into that space to bring out some shadow as well. I realize I just went on a really crazy tangent there linguistically. Yet the unconscious mind, when it goes through those 4 questions, it'll kind of fracture a little bit, because the answers will come forward in doing that. But to work in the 12th house is great. I would suggest that the learnings come from the 12th house out of actions that we might not be conscious of. People have to show us our behaviors. Like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be using so much drugs. We hear that. Otherwise, we're just lost in that illusion. And so it almost has to be brought to us by somebody that we would know, like, and trust to want to hear that from.
Right. Yeah, well, and how I've experienced the 12th house energies too is like things are not as they seem, which I think is just a lot of shadow work too. It's because it's again not clear to you. So in my experience, I would attract people who I really want to, you know, I feel like they're my friend, you know, but then as time reveals, the shadow then reveals itself. It's like, oh, the hidden enemy is here. And sometimes I am definitely the hidden enemy within those relationships because my dynamics, how I'm subconsciously acting, is bringing out things within the relationship that are unpleasant to me or the other person because I'm unconscious about it. But once it becomes conscious, then that's the moment of truth within the relationship. Like, is this an authentic relationship of connecting, or is this just us doing our shadow work projections with each other?
Both things can be true. Both things can be true, especially if you have a partner that's willing to do their own work and let you do your own work. If you can have that, then both things can be true. You know, just another place where you will find your shadow, and this will make a lot of sense. It's anybody that you've ever been intimate with.
Right.
Is in the 7th house. It's also anybody that your past partners have been intimate with. So your lovers, past lovers, are going to be in the shadow. You know, bringing that back to the 12th house. Again, I haven't played in that little wading pool, that big wading pool of looking for shadow there, and yet
It is. Well, and like my belief system anyway within that is that our 12th house is who we are. We just don't really see it because it's our subconscious, right? So like, yeah, we could be an Aries rising, for example, but if you have Pisces, that 12th house, that's what's fueling that Aries energy. That's the reason for everything.
It's the womb from which the Aries came from.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just feel like if we're doing shadow work, acknowledging that might give us an extra tool, like maybe even looking at the ruler of that 12th house or whatever, and maybe that will give you some information of more shadow work to do, because it's like, well, that's literally in the shadow of your consciousness. So if we focus on that, we might be able to bring to light some of that shadow.
Yes, I have Virgo on the cusp and Libra intersected in the 12th house, so I get to look there. I've got enough Virgo because my South node's in Virgo, so I've got enough
Virgo for sure. Yeah, well, and it's complex. You know, charts. We have opposing desires within ourselves sometimes. You know, our values could oppose like our desires. You know, with squares and things like that, depending on how things are communicating.
So yeah. Now that I look at it in relationship to the 6th house, if the 6th house is that part of the chart where we want to seek perfection in ourselves, we want to get to that purity of expression, it would make sense that the 12th house would carry some shadow energy for sure. Because Virgo as an energy, as it seeks perfection, there's also a level of judgment that is part of the unbalanced projection of Virgo energy. And where there's judgment, there can often be, if the judgment is out of balance, there can be shadow energy there.
Definitely.
And so a way of knowing if the judgment's in balance or out of balance is just asking yourself, is there a charge with the judgment? Because there is such thing as right judgment. And that's the judgment that propels you further down the path towards where you're going. There's actually a card in the deck for judgment.
Literally.
And it symbolizes the conscious mind and the unconscious mind looking up to the archangel Gabriel, and Gabriel is announcing the birth of the child. All of them are ashen in color, so they're all balanced in their energies. And so it's literally Gabriel announcing the new child has been born, and that child that's been born is the balanced new you.
Ooh, I love that. Forever transformed. Well, and the judgment card too is so interesting to me. It's associated with the planet Pluto, right? So it's giving very much eclipsey energy to me. It's a very powerful moment, like the moment of truth, the moment of judgment. Are you, with your actions that you've taken, like your growth, your self-investigation, are you going to be elevated from that, or are you going to be a victim of your circumstance and fall or stay,
Yeah, it's I'm reading this book right now, um, by Howard Sesperis. I believe I said his last name right.
Okay.
And he's talking about the relationship between Saturn. Okay, so Saturn gives us those answers whether we like it or not. But he talks about Saturn in relationship to the other outer planets, and how Saturn might be this form that we give our lives or not give our lives. The outer planets come along and they will eventually win out over what Saturn wants to give structure to, because what Saturn wants to give structure to might not be in our greatest good.
Right.
And so Pluto will come along and it'll transform us, or Uranus will come along and it'll awaken us, or Neptune will come along and it'll keep us checked out.
Yeah.
In that dreamy, Piscean energy, if you will.
Definitely.
So, anyway, another tangent.
We could talk about this forever, which is amazing. One thing I really do want to ask you, though, that we did touch on earlier, before we close out, is about discernment within shadow work. So an example that I had given you earlier was that I had a friend falling out like a month or two ago at this point, and I really felt, they were saying that I'm projecting all this stuff. Like, Bren, you're projecting all this stuff on our relationship. Like, you're the problem, blah, 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 blah. That's what I was receiving from this person. And as someone, like, I usually have the tendency of taking that on and being like, you're right. And sometimes in a victim mindset too, you're right. Like, I'm the bad guy here. Like, I could have done all these things to make this relationship better, yada, yada, yada. But in retrospect, after, diving into this issue with some friends and getting a clear perspective, feeling my feelings, doing the shadow work through time, I realized that what they were saying was actually their own projection, like, of their insecurities within the relationship and things like that. So my question to you is, how do you get clear on the ownership of taking, your shadow, and like those, what's happening in your life? Like, there's a reason for that, and there's, that was mirrored to me for a reason, and also their baggage is not mine at the same time. So what do you claim for yourself and what do you not within shadow work?
So I claim everything until I've learned the lesson. Okay, so how is this happening for me is where I go once the smoke has settled. Okay, so this is happening for me. I'm questioning on if this projection is mine or if it was theirs. If you take ownership of every projection being yours and every interpretation being yours, you're at least on the right step to figuring out what's true for you. And so I like to ask some questions that really support me. And this goes along the lines of, is my thinking binary, or is it looking for the opposites and possibilities? So if it's binary, it's yes, no. There's usually some baggage in it. You can probably own it if you're owning some binary thinking. That's almost always going to be your interpretation, your projection. Okay. One of the questions that you can ask yourself is, am I coming at this energy from a righteous position of this is so? Do I have to be right about this? Okay. What would happen if I wasn't right about this? What wouldn't happen if I was right about this? And so what wouldn't happen if I wasn't right about this? We can kind of go through those Cartesian questions and say, okay, well, this is one way I can get there. But if I find myself in that position of righteousness and I'm pointing the finger, I'm the one pointing the finger saying blah, 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 blah. And when the smoke's settled, I can go back to this and I can say, well, is this it? If I'm still saying this is so, this is my reality, and I'm still charged with it, then chances are it is your energy that you get to focus on. If your energy is like, well, is this so? Is what they said so? Then I can begin to ask questions that would poke holes into the energy that's captured in whatever it is I'm working with on the shadow. And so the goal with the shadow work is to get to a point where you have a learning, and a learning doesn't have to be conscious, and learning can be energetic. Like how many times have you had a feeling where you're just like, oh, thank God, and you didn't even have to have a thought with it? So so a learning can be energetic. So you go through that. Is this so? Well, what is it that I need to know that I don't know, that if I did know, I would think differently? Okay. There's a possibility then that there's an expansion of that truth, their truth, that was projected onto me, that I then turned into my own belief. So there's a lot of different ways we can work with this. These are just some thoughts that are coming too. But trust your gut. I would imagine that's probably the best thing we can come with. Is it like, you know, it feels yucky in the moment. Okay, it feels yucky in the moment, and yeah, if you respond in such a violent, temperamental tower moment to somebody projecting their stuff onto you, it's likely that you have some shadow work to do as well. It's, you know, you attracted yourself to this person, they attracted themselves to you, so that you could figure those learnings out. So every failed relationship happens for you.
Yes.
Every projection gone wrong happens for you. And is that taking on more than you need to? Well, if there's still a negative charge, take it on, because there's something there for you to grow with.
Right. Even if it's not the projection that they're putting on you, there's still something there, because you're feeling that. Well, and something that I was experiencing with this situation in particular was that, you know, I do have a pattern within relationships of things like this happening. Like somewhere down the line, there's like a misunderstanding, things blow up bigger than I feel like need to be, but that's also usually because there's a lot of stuff going under the surface, like a lot of passiveness, honestly, like not setting boundaries sooner with certain people. So within this dynamic, my insecurity came from, wow, well, I keep attracting relationships like this and like having friendship endings, I must be a problem in XYZ. And you know, I have to take accountability within that, and also there has to be a balance of that too, within like what is mine, what is not, because also I can take responsibility for my stuff, but I don't need to take responsibility for theirs, which is sometimes something that I do just because this is hard to trust sometimes. Well,
and if you have Libra in your 7th house, you know, the tendency is Libra is the masculine expression of Venus. Venus wants to be in relationships, outward, connecting, touching with people. They want to maintain that mutuality. And so one of the shadow energies from Venus is really losing the concept that there are boundaries in order to maintain the relationship, because the relationship must be there, else Libra is not connecting and doing the mutuality thing that it wants to do.
Right.
So there's I think we touched about this a little earlier, is that, you know, that dependency on there being a relationship might let a Libra type energy forego their own needs for the sake of staying in a relationship, which touches directly on that lovely word that you mentioned just a few moments ago of boundaries.
Right.
So I have a frame that I like to have boundaries. This could be a powerful moment for a lot of people, because it's my belief that boundaries are so misunderstood, because we put the energy on the other person to change. Stop doing that. You're driving me crazy. This is my boundary. Stop doing that.
Right.
The frame I like to put around boundaries, and this would be a great topic for another show, is that boundaries are how you share what it looks like for others to win with you.
Ooh, I love that.
Here's how you win with me. And the Libra energy gets to come forward with saying, okay, if this continues, here's what I will do. I'm going to step into my Aries and I'm going to take the action that I said I was going to take. I'm not expecting you to change. I'm going to step back into my Aries and I'm going to take the action that I say I'm going to take.
Right.
It's your chart is it's ideal for bringing that there.
Definitely.
So now, okay, and the energy is out there. So okay, now I get to go and reflect back into my relationships and say, was I aware of this frame for boundaries? How did I approach them? Did I project onto my partners the need for them to change? Or did I back away from my own empowerment by not following through with my intention on the boundary in the first place?
Right. That is so powerful. And that's a big, I'm finishing up my Saturn return technically still, because Saturn will re-enter Pisces later this year. But that's been boundaries, like Saturn is the planet of boundaries. So your Saturn return is going to bring up some sort of relationship with boundaries. And what you just said just is so viscerally like what that experience to me has been in my Saturn return, and like claiming, like setting my boundaries not to change or manipulate or whatever other people, but yeah, show people this is how you treat me. If you don't, this is the action I will take. Like, yes, please don't, do, if you're annoying me or something, please don't do that. If you're going to do that, I'm probably going to spend less time with you, not like keep lecturing you over and over again why you shouldn't do it,
Yeah. Like when we get into the shoulds and shouldn'ts unconsciously, there's all sorts of judgment, and it's not the right judgment. It's the out of balance judgments, and so there's tons of shadow in there.
Yeah.
Can be.
Yeah.
Can be.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, with any light, I don't know. There's shadow in everything, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we are running short on time, but I just wanted to ask you before we close out, like, are there any last messages that you wanted to share with our listeners before closing out?
I would just say keep at it. Keep exploring different ways to grow yourself. There's a wealth of knowledge out there, and just keep looking for it. Trust your gut on who to learn from, and just as you go through this, you might hear Bren say something one way, you might hear me say something the other way, and however it is that you heard it said, just know that not all knowledge and wisdom comes from the same school. And so by putting yourself in that learner's frame and checking your own knowledge at the door, you're coming into any situation from which you're learning as an empty cup. And you can be filled up with new knowledge, even if you have some familiarity with the topic.
Definitely. Well, we were even talking earlier too about how everyone can be your teacher, even if it's someone that, you learn the best from your most unpleasant teachers. I will say that too. Maybe how someone's living your life is so aversive to you, like you hate it so much that it's teaching you don't want to live like that. So, everyone teaches you something. So keeping an open mind, that's what we're all about here on this, channel. Our fool's fortune is our wisdom, and to be open to learning in whatever phase we are in on our journey, whether we're on our High Priestess or Tower moment, there's something to learn from everything.
Yeah. And if I could just to give a brief example of how I work with folks. Okay. So
what do you do? Please tell everyone, like, what is yeah.
So I'll do my best to connect with the emotional hows of how I can serve people. I help people get unstuck, either in career, in relationship. I can help people get connected to their purpose. I have some certifications in neuro-linguistic programming, which allows me to work with the left side of the brain, the logical side. And then I'm also connected with the Hawaiian spiritual practice of Huna, where I learned about astrology and I learned about tarot. And so what that has also done is it's allowed me to connect more with the emotional side or the right side. And so I come at the coaching, I come at the work that I do from a balanced perspective, and I can meet my clients where they're at. Some people aren't into the esoteric, some people only want the esoteric. And so I've got the ability to pull natal charts and look at progressions and also transits and just see what's going on and what's current and active right now in somebody's chart. And that's what I love to do. The neurolinguistic programming, I'm actually a master practitioner and a trainer, and I have a certification as an integrative NLP coach. And that just, for what it's worth, those are all recognized by the Society of Integrative Psychology. And so that's some fun stuff that I do on the side.
So yeah, people who are not woo-woo or whatever can still respect the tools that you're bringing to the table, because it is rooted in research and psychology of some kind.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're all energy, and we're all energy.
Yeah.
So how getting rid of baggage either through linguistics or through energy work, the baggage is going to be gone.
Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And, if people want to find you and learn more from you, how can they reach you?
So the easiest way, I'll give out my phone number. I'm not shy. It's 303-908-5530. On my message, I'll be asking you a question to share with me something that you're also grateful for in the day. And so leave your name, number, and what you're grateful for. I'll get back to you. And then if you want to email me, it's Sean@futurepacenow, all one word, .com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that we link that in the show notes so you can view that as well. And my name's Bren again, and you can find me on Instagram or YouTube at Fortune of the Fool or BrenBigs, and that will also be linked in the show notes if you want some tarot or astrology, more chats along this realm. And with that, I think we're complete with that. Any other last thoughts? Closing thoughts?
Embrace the shadow. It's where the growth is.
It is. And that's what life's all about, is growing. We're all on our journeys. So embrace that. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.